Have you ever wondered what really happens to royalty when death arrives? Behind all the power and glory lie dark secrets buried beneath centuries of stone. Get ready to uncover the shocking story of Queen Elizabeth I, not in life, but in death. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. That really helps more hidden stories from around the world reach you. What if I told you that beneath the grand stone floors of England's most famous cathedrals lie secrets that challenge everything we think we know about royalty? Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen who ruled with iron will for over 4 decades, met an end that few dare to imagine. Her body's fate wasn't a peaceful rest. It was a brutal struggle against time, decay, and dark rituals designed to contain a power that even death couldn't simply silence. Elizabeth wasn't just any monarch. She was the living symbol of an era defined by rebellion, war, and unyielding ambition. From crushing the mighty Spanish Armada to navigating deadly conspiracies within her own court, her life was a constant battle. Yet the real story lies not in her victories, but in what happened after her final breath, a harrowing process of embalming and burial that reveals the harsh truths about death in the 16th century, far from the elegance and pomp we imagine. But this is only the beginning. What awaited Elizabeth's body was a fate so chilling that it would haunt the pages of history and shatter the illusion of royal immortality. She didn't just wear the crown, she became the crown. Queen Elizabeth I wasn't a ruler by chance, she was a force of nature, commanding loyalty and fear in equal measure. Her very presence reshaped England, earning her the name Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the last great monarch of the Tudor dynasty. But behind the grandeur was a woman haunted by shadows few ever saw. Her power was immense, yet so was the price she paid to hold it. For 44 years, she navigated a world of deadly alliances, religious wars, and betrayals within her own bloodline. She defeated the Spanish Armada, silenced rebellions, and brought England into a golden age, all while surviving plots to end her reign. Even her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, tried to claim her throne and paid with her life. Elizabeth signed that execution order herself, a decision that would torment her until her final days. But despite all the victories and the myths she created, one fear always lingered. A fear not of enemies or invasion, but of what would happen to her body when she was gone. And what awaited her after death was far worse than any royal scandal she faced in life, because what came next was nothing short of horrifying.
What terrified Queen Elizabeth I more than war, betrayal, or assassination? The answer is unsettling: the fate of her body after death. In a time when monarchs were buried with ceremony but treated with brutal practicality behind the scenes, Elizabeth feared the cold, invasive rituals that awaited her. She had seen firsthand how quickly a royal body could be desecrated, how dignity vanished the moment breath stopped. For her, death wasn't just the end of life, it was the beginning of a loss of control. Her fear wasn't paranoia, it was rooted in grim reality. The 16th century was ruthless when it came to handling the dead. Embalming wasn't gentle or respectful, it was violent, surgical, and often gruesome. Elizabeth, who had spent her reign protecting her image with precision, could not bear the thought of being cut open, emptied, and filled with spices like a rotting relic. She begged her closest advisors, "Do not open me, do not break me." She wanted to meet God whole, unbroken, and untouched. But royal requests don't always survive the silence of death, and Elizabeth's final wish would soon be overruled by something far stronger than her royal command: the grim necessity of preserving a decaying queen. What came next was a scene of horror, hidden behind velvet curtains, and it was only the beginning. Imagine being laid on a cold stone slab, your lifeless body sliced open by long, sharpened blades, not out of cruelty, but routine. That was the reality of royal embalming in the 16th century. It wasn't sacred, ceremonial, or kind. It was mechanical, invasive, and brutally efficient. Bodies were emptied of their insides by hand. Hearts, lungs, livers, all removed, one by one, with no dignity spared. To delay the inevitable rot, the hollowed cavity was stuffed with potent spices, cloves, myrrh, cinnamon, not to honor the dead, but to mask the overwhelming stench of decay. Embalmers weren't healers of the past. They were damage control experts, trying to prevent the corpse from swelling, bursting, and leaking during the funeral. The entire process was more about preserving the illusion of peace than granting it. And no one, not even Elizabeth I, was spared this treatment. Her body, once revered and protected in life, became a shell to be managed like any other. The same queen who commanded armies and bent Europe to her will was now being gutted in secret. But even with all the efforts, there was no escaping the grotesque transformation that was coming, because her body was already preparing to fight back from within. In her final hours, Queen Elizabeth I made one desperate plea: "Do not open me." She begged her physicians to leave her body untouched, whole, and sealed, a last attempt to maintain the dignity she had fiercely guarded all her life. To Elizabeth, the idea of being cut open and emptied was unbearable. She believed that to meet her maker, her body had to remain intact. It wasn't just fear, it was sacred to her. But once her final breath escaped, so did her authority. The moment she died, the power that once moved nations vanished. Her wishes, so clearly spoken, were ignored. The physicians knew the risks of letting a royal corpse rot untreated: swelling, gas buildup, and eventual rupture. And so, under the weight of duty and fear of public disaster, they did what had to be done. The Queen's body was opened like any other. What followed was a silent betrayal, a hidden defiance of the Queen's final command. But in the eyes of her court, it was a necessary evil. They believed they were preserving her honor, not destroying it. Little did they know, the real nightmare hadn't even begun, because Elizabeth's body was far from finished making its mark. Elizabeth's embalming wasn't about honoring a queen, it was damage control. Without intervention, the gases inside her body could have caused a gruesome scene. The coffin bursting open mid-funeral, her remains exposed in front of her mourning kingdom. It had happened before in royal history, and the court was determined not to let Elizabeth become another horrifying example. Her embalming was urgent, not sacred.
Her organs were gone. In their place, fragrant herbs and spices were packed tightly into her hollow chest, not for ritual, but to buy time. Every decision was made with one goal: containment. Her body was then wrapped in crimson velvet, embroidered with Tudor roses, a final attempt to display majesty, even as nature worked against them. But the illusion of control was fragile, and they knew it. She was placed inside a heavy, lead-lined coffin, sealed tightly to trap the decay. A royal barge carried her down the Thames, under gray skies and across silent waters. Thousands gathered in mourning, unaware of the quiet battle happening inside that coffin, a battle between honor and rot. But even sealed in lead, something was slipping through. Something sweet, sickly, and impossible to ignore. Above ground, it was a picture of eternal peace, a magnificent tomb inside Westminster Abbey, draped in reverence and royal pride. Visitors saw polished marble, glowing candlelight, and the solemn beauty of a queen laid to rest. But that was the illusion. Beneath the stone lay a very different reality, one that time refused to keep buried. Elizabeth's coffin was not just holding history, it was hiding a ticking problem. The lead shell that encased her was meant to last forever, but death has its own timeline. As days turned to decades, and decades into centuries, the gases inside her embalmed body didn't rest. The coffin began to warp under pressure. Cracks formed. A strange, sweet odor, faint but undeniable, seeped into the air around her resting place. Elizabeth, even in death, refused to be silent. And that silence wouldn't last much longer. Centuries after her burial, her tomb would be disturbed, not by enemies, but by curiosity. What explorers found beneath the surface would shatter any illusions of royal immortality, because the truth hidden behind stone and velvet was darker than anyone expected, and it was about to be revealed. In the late 1800s, curiosity cracked open the silence of the dead. Dean Arthur Stanley, a man consumed with the Victorian obsession with unearthing the past, was granted permission to explore the sealed royal tombs beneath Westminster Abbey. Lantern in hand, he descended into the crypt, a cold, dark vault where time stood still. What he found wasn't a scene of royal glory. It was collapse, decay, and the eerie stench of centuries-old death. Elizabeth's once grand coffin had crumbled. The velvet that once wrapped her like a queen was now brittle, faded, stained. Even the lead meant to contain her had warped and bent, unable to hold back the slow, relentless hunger of time. Her initials, E.R., were still faintly visible, like a ghost clinging to what was left. But the real shock came from what rested above her, the remains of her half-sister, Mary I. Enemies in life, now stacked together in the same narrow vault. Fire and blood had once divided them. Now, in death, they lay side by side, silent, decaying, forgotten. Stanley stood surrounded by rot, by two queens whose feud had shaped a nation, now reduced to dust and collapsed wood. It was a haunting reminder that no power, no crown, no dynasty is immune to the slow destruction of time. But Elizabeth's story didn't end there. Not quite. Time, the one force no monarch can conquer, had done what no army ever could. It broke the Virgin Queen. Elizabeth's body, so carefully embalmed and sealed, had not decayed in peace. The internal gases continued their silent assault, warping the coffin, standing the velvet, and consuming the last fragments of royal flesh. Her tomb may have promised eternal rest, but nature never signed that agreement.
What remained was a haunting contradiction. Fragments of majesty buried in rot. The Tudor rose, once vibrant, now faded and barely clinging to fabric turned to dust. The symbols of power, gold thread, carved initials, were drowned in the collapse of what had once been invincible. Her identity lingered only in traces, whispers left behind in silence and decay. The queen who had ruled oceans was now reduced to a fragile, bloated memory sealed in darkness. Above her, tourists walked Westminster's polished marble floors, admiring the beauty, unaware of the horror beneath their feet. Because time is the great equalizer, it bends lead, it breaks flesh, and it buries legends in silence. And Elizabeth's body, still sealed in its secret chamber, is proof that no crown lasts forever. But there's one last question. What truly survives, the body or the story? Elizabeth I is remembered as a legend, a queen who ruled with brilliance, strength, and unmatched presence. Her legacy lives on in portraits, books, and the stories of an era she helped define. But beneath the stone and gold, her body tells a very different tale. A tale of decay, forgotten wishes, and the relentless power of time that even royalty cannot resist. What remains of her now is not grandeur, but a quiet, crumbling truth. Her tomb is more than a monument. It's a message that even the greatest rulers, wrapped in velvet and buried in lead, are still human, still dust waiting to return to the earth. Elizabeth may have outwitted kings and conquered empires, but she couldn't escape nature's final verdict. And in that silent vault, her story continues to echo, not in glory, but in the slow, unstoppable fade into history. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. That really helps more hidden stories from around the world reach you.